Well, let's begin. Welcome everybody who's in the worship center, but also online, that will be online watching this later. We are glad you're here with us. And I need to turn the volume down. Okay. So today we're continuing into 2 Kings chapter 10 through 17. I think last time we met before Christmas it said 9. It was up to chapter 10. We only got to chapter 9. So let's sort of review. Well, what in the heck? Oh, there's the reason. Okay. Okay. Everything's working a little strange. Well, it's not working. Oh, the heck? Oh, there it is. Okay, let's begin. We've gotten rid of Ahab and Jezebel, and that's what, as we said, as we've been reading before, good riddance to the loss of Jezebel. What a horrible person she was, and what a horrible queen she was. And same thing for Ahab. But Ahab and Jezebel weren't the only bad ones that we've encountered. Jehu will prove, who's taken over, will prove to be such more despicable than anyone before. As we read, and I have up on there that said the bad girls of the Bible, Jezebel was just one of the bad girls of the Bible that we study sometimes in a Bible study class, etc. There's also more bad girls. There's 2 different books that are out there we could use in a Bible study. And when we get to chapter 11, and you already read that, we encounter probably the worst of all the women in the Bible as we read. So let's just a quick review, and the fact, Jehu is the 10th king of the Northern Kingdom. He's reigned from 841 to 814 BCE, and he became king by assassinating King Ahab and King Azareth of the Northern Kingdom, and then King Jeroboam, who he shot with an arrow in the southern kingdom of Judah. So he has killed kings in both sides. He is working to unite the 2 kingdoms once again, just as David did. And he also killed the vile Jezebel by having her thrown out of the window, and then driving his chariot over the body and entering into the palace and eating her meal. So as we enter chapter 10, we see that Jehu will destroy all of Ahab's family. And this is something we've seen over and over. They become king, and the first thing they do is they're going to kill all the predecessors' family, so they will not have any viable members of the throne. We've witnessed that. We've seen that. So Jehu's actions will show how remarkable King David was, and the fact that King David did not kill those of Saul's family. We know they all met, quote, accidents, or were killed because of his men assumed that's what he wanted to have done. So we'll see many of them die. But when it comes to Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, we see what they didn't think, that David would take him into his household and fulfill his promise to Jonathan to protect his family. He asked Mephibosheth would actually become a member of his family and would eat at his table with him. And please, I apologize as I'm having to adjust how I look at things. So let's jump in. today's reading. We begin in chapter 10. We see Ahab's family will be killed. The officials of Jezreel to the elders, to the guardian. Well, actually, now there were in Samaria 70 sons of the house of Ahab. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria. And so what I love to do when I look at the Bible sometimes is think about how it's written, and we don't really see it structured this way. But here's the letter to the officials of Jezreel, to the elders and the guardians of Ahab's children. He writes a letter to them. He says, you have your master's sons, and you have chariots and horses, a fortified city and weapons. Now, as soon as the letter reaches you, choose the best and most worthy of your master's sons and set him on his father's throne. Then fight for your master's house. Signed, King Jehu. So you want their sons to reign, they're going to have to fight for their position. But they were all terrified. So, and if two kings could not resist him, how can we? And that's what they look at. He has already killed two of the kings before him. He's also killed the king of the southern kingdom. And now if he says, if you want one of Ahab's sons to be king, stand up and fight. So the palace administrators, the city governor, of the elders, and the guardians sent the message to Jehu, we are your servants, and we will do anything you say. We will not appoint anyone as king, and you do whatever you think best. So we see him step forth in that way. And Jehu then writes a second letter to them, saying, if you are on my side and will obey me, take the heads of your master's sons and come to me in Jezreel by this time tomorrow. Wow. So what do? Now the royal princes, 70 of them, were with the leading men of the city who were rearing them. When the letter arrived, these men took the princes and slaughtered all 70 of them. They put their heads in baskets and sent them to Jehu and Jezreel. When the messenger arrived, he told Jehu they had brought the heads of the princes. So what do? What happens when they get there? Well, Jehu orders them, put them in two piles at the entrance to the city gate until morning. Could you imagine that? Entering into Gloucester courthouse area, and there'd be two piles of heads. The next morning, Jehu went out. He stood before all the people and said, you are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him, but who will kill all these? Know that not a word the Lord has spoken against the house of Ahab will fall. The Lord has done what he announced to his servant Elijah. So Jehu killed everyone in Jezreel who remained of the house of Ahab, as well as his chief men, his close friends, his priests, leaving no survivor. He has killed all who could have a claim to the throne, and do the same to the descendants of King Ahaziah. So this is the Jehu we're meeting and beginning to experience and see what he was willing to do to take the power of the throne. So we see him step through, and that we come on to verse 18, and we see here, then Jehu brought all the priests together and said to them, remember, Ahab worshiped Baal. So Ahab served Baal a little, and Jehu tells them Jehu will serve him much. Now summon all the prophets of Baal and all his servants and all his priests. See that no one is missing, because I am going to hold a great sacrifice for Baal. Anyone who fails to come, see that because anyone who fails to come will no longer live. But Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. So he's telling the people, bring them all together. So he called the assembly in honor of Baal, and they crowded into the temple of Baal there in Jezreel, and until it was full from one end to the other. Then Jehu said to the keepers of the wardrobe, bring the robes for all the servants of Baal. So he brought out all the robes for them. So that was a very tradition, and well, in fact, the fact that Baal servants, the priests would have robes and refinery that they would wear when they were worshiping. Then Jehu and Jenabab, son of Rechab, went into the temple of Baal, and Jehu said to the servants of Baal, "Look around and see that no one who serves the Lord is here with you, only servants of Baal." So they went to make sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had posted 80 men outside with this warning: if one of them lets any of the men I am placing in your hands escape, it will be your life for his life. What a threat to the men, to make sure that they're paying attention and that they're going to fulfill what they're going to be instructed to do. And as soon as Jehu had finished making the burnt offering, he ordered the guards and officers, "Go in and kill them. Let no one escape." So they cut them down with the sword. The guards and officers threw the bodies out, and they entered into the shrine of the temple of the Baal. They brought the sacrifice stone out of the temple and Baal and burned it. They demolished the sacred stone of Baal and tore down the temple of Baal, and the people have used it for a latrine to this day. Did you get that imagery when you read, you thought about what this was? It's like, wow. So Jehu destroyed Baal worship in Israel, and that's what he's doing, what God wants him to do, and what God has been wanting him to do so many times before. However, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which had caused Israel to commit the worship of the golden calves at Bethel and Dan. Remember, Jeroboam built the two temples when they first broke away, and there he made the golden calves again, and they began to worship those. So when you think about it, when you read about him, some people you would think he's a psychopath or a mass murderer, and other people, when the other readers, and I've read others where they'll say he's a conqueror in there. But I think about, what did God call him? So the Lord said to Jehu, "Because you have done well in accomplishing what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab all I have in mind to do, your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation." I don't know about you, but I think we will have to wrestle with this, that God Jehu has killed all these people as far as the previous kings and their families and everything else, but he has done what God has been asking them to do all along, is rid the nation of these people who practice and the leaders of the worship of Baal and other gods. He did everything but what Jeroboam had done. So as they move on, King Jeroboam in the southern kingdom is dead. So in chapter 9, Jehu killed King Jeroboam by shooting him with an arrow. So in chapter 11, we'll see what happens. So now we're going to jump to the southern kingdom. We've been in the northern kingdom, now we're going to the south. And who do we meet? Athaliah. We think what Jezebel did in motivating and doing the things behind the scenes for Ahab and to cause others to be killed, etc. Athaliah is what we would call the worst of those in the Bible. She is the first and only king who is an actual woman and we see that in 2 Kings. So Athaliah and Joash. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. This is what it is when you see someone who really wants power. And here she's taking power, and she will do anything to have power. So what does she do? She will kill all her grandchildren to become king. But Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Jeroboam, the sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princesses who were about to be murdered. She put him and his nurse in the bedroom to hide him from Athaliah, so he was not killed. He remained hidden with his nurse at the temple of the Lord for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled the land. She was a ruthless leader, from what we know, and from other documents that are from this time. And she was a murderess to the top, making sure there was no one who could take the power from the throne that she had. So, but she did not know about this one grandson. So the 7th year, Jehoiada sent for the commanders of the units of 100, the Cariites and the guards, and had them brought to him at the temple of the Lord. So remember, in the southern kingdom, he made a covenant with them and put them under oath at the temple of the Lord. Then he showed him the king's son. And he commanded them, saying, "This is what you are to do. You are in the 3 companies that are going on duty on the Sabbath. A third of your guarding the royal palace, a third at the Shur gate, and the third gate behind the guard, who takes turns guarding the temple. And you who are in the other companies that normally go off Sabbath duty are all to guard the temple for the king. Station yourselves around the king, each of you with weapons in hand. Anyone who approaches your ranks is to be put to death. Stay close to the king wherever he goes." So he has brought the loyal guards back and has them he's guiding them, brought them under a covenant, etc. It's about to bring back, to take away the power of Athaliah. The commanders of youths of 100 did just as Jehoiada the priest ordered. Each one of them took his men, those who were going on duty the Sabbath, and those who were going off duty, and came to Jehoiada the priest. Then he gave the commanders the spears and the shields that belonged to King David, and that were in the temple of the Lord. So there were some of the weapons still there. The guards, each with weapons in hand, stationed themselves around the king near the altar of the temple, from the south side to the north side of the temple. Can you remember in your mind the pictures of what the temple looked like and how the spacing of it was from where we studied it before when it was first built by King David? Jehoiada brought out the king's son and put a crown on him. So here's a 7-year little boy with the crown of the king on his head. I always wonder, in the fact we've read before, how heavy this crown could be. So I don't know if there's a lighter crown that they would have placed upon him. But to see the 7-year little boy standing there in royal robes with the crown on, and they anointed him, and the people clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king." That was we would hear that, the trumpet would play, etc. So when all this is going on, they're hearing all this noise come from the temple. Athaliah is hearing these people yelling, "Long live the king, long live the king." And the people are surrounding the temple saying that. And so she looked out, and there was the king standing by the pillar, as the custom was. And the officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the Lord were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her robe and called out, "Treason, treason!" So she's coming and yelling treason because she wants him killed at this point. Well, Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders of the units of 100 who were in charge of the troops, bring her and out between the ranks and put to the sword anyone who follows her. For the priest had said she must not be put to death in the temple of the Lord, because she had entered the temple of the Lord yelling treason, treason. So they seized her as she reached the place where the horses entered the palace grounds, and there she was put to death. So they brought her out and they put her to death. Now, Jehoiada will guide Joash, and as long as he is with him, we will see him doing the right things. And that is what we will see him being a good king. So we see him stepping forward. We continue in the story that Jehoiada then made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they would be the Lord's people. He also made a covenant between the king and the people. All the people on the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols to pieces and killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altar. So they did what they were instructed to do finally, is to rid Judah of these other gods, these other temple worship, etc. But as he posted guards at the temple of the Lord, he took with him the commanders of hundreds and the Cariites, the guards and the people of the land. Together they brought the king down from the temple of the Lord and went into the palace, entering by the way of the gate of the guards. The king then took his place on the royal throne. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was calm because Athaliah had been slain with the sword of the palace. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. So we know at 7 years of age, he is probably not really, he is being guided, he is being told what to say. And, but the priest is guiding him in everything to make sure he is doing what is right in the eyes of the Lord. So he will do well. He will do as long as he's mentored by the good priest, Jehoiada. So what's the first thing they instruct? Joash in the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 40 years. His mother's name was Zebabai, and she was from Beersheba. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years Jehoiada, the priest, instructed him. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. So they had not done everything what God had been instructing them to do. But Joash said to the priests, collect all the money that is brought as a sacrifice offering to the temple of the Lord, the money collected in the census, the money received from the personal vows, and the money brought voluntarily to the temple. Let every priest receive the money from one of the treasurers, then use it to repair whatever damage is found in the temple. The temple has been falling apart. They have not been repairing it, etc. So he had this plan for them to start to collect the money and use it to repair the temple and bring it back into this grandeur it was supposed to be. But did they do that? We see that by the 23rd year of the King Joash, the priest still had not repaired the temple. Therefore, King Joash summoned Jehoiada, the priest, and the other priests, and asked them, why aren't you repairing the damage done into the temple? Take no more money from the treasuries, but hand it over for repairing the temple. So where had all the money gone? Did you think, when you read, you think about that? It's because the priests are still corrupt. The priests are, rather than taking and giving what is to God, they're taking it for themselves. And that's what we see. Well, the priest agreed that they would not collect any more money from the people, and that they would not repair, and that they would not repair the temple themselves. That's what they've been trying to do. The priest took a chest, so he took a chest, the Jehoiada took a chest and bored a hole in it, the lid, and placed it beside the altar on the right side as they entered the temple of the Lord. As I read that, I think about the box that Carl's made out front for us. It's a place we drop it off. It's locked. It's there for the counters to receive. And that's why you think about this is what we do ourselves in church. The fact that the priest, or pastor, I do not touch money. It's the practices we have carried forth in the fact that we have two people count and all those things that we do to keep honor and keep tracking of what we receive in God's name. Well, the priest who guarded the entrance put to the chest all the money that was brought to the temple of the Lord, whenever they saw that there was a large amount of money in the chest. The royal secretary, the high priest came, so two people came. counted the money that had been brought into the temple of the Lord, and put it into bags. Then when that amount had been determined, they gave the money to the men appointed to supervise the work of the temple. Pretty much what we do today in so many ways is this is some of the ways we've gotten this idea, and this is how we implemented it within our communities today. I think almost all Christian communities do it this way. With that, they paid those who worked in the temple of the Lord, and the carpenters and builders, the masons and stone cutters, and they purchased timber and blocks of dressed stone for the repair of the temple and the Lord, and met all the other expenses by restoring the temple. So that they gave it to the craftsmen because they knew the craftsmen would honor what they'd been instructed to do. So the money brought into the temple was not spent for making silver basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, or any other articles of gold or silver of the temple. It was paid for the workers who used to repair the temple, to repair the wood, the other refinery within there to put it all back in place. They did not require an accounting for those to whom they gave the money to pay for the workers because they acted with complete honesty. The money from the guilt offerings and sin offerings was not brought into the temple of the Lord. It belonged to the priest. So that money was retained for them to take care of themselves financially, to provide for their food, etc., and all those things. Well, about this time, Hazael, king of Aram, went up and attacked Gath and captured it. Then he turned to attack Jerusalem. So we see Aram is up in the northern kingdom again. It's the Syrian Empire, we think, at this point. And the fact that he is coming to attack, but Joash, king of Judah, took all the sacred objects dedicated by his predecessors, Jehoshaphat, Jeroboam, Ahaziah, the kings of Judah, and the gifts that he himself had dedicated, and all the gold found in the treasuries of the temple of the Lord in the royal palace, and he sent them to Hazael, king of Aram, who then withdrew from Jerusalem. So he paid them to keep away. And says, well, here, you have everything we have. So he basically paid a bounty. And this will prove it was a very unwise decision to do. Because what happens, you pay someone for protection, they're going to come back and ask for more money later to keep the same protection. Well, as for the other events of the reign of Joash and all he did that was written in the Annals and Kings of Judah, Joash would end his life with his officials conspired against him and assassinated him. And the officials who then would have murdered him were Jozabad, son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, son of Shomar. He died and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. And Amaziah, his son, succeeded him as king. So we see that's the end of Joash. And Joash did everything that was right until he lost his guide, his caretaker, the priest. So we continue on. In the 23rd year of Joash, son of Ahaziah, the king of Judah, Jehoshaphat, son of Jehu, became king of Israel and Samaria. So we're jumping back again to the northern kingdom. So we're back we've left the southern kingdom, we're back in the northern kingdom. And we see Jehu's son, Jehoshaphat, become king. And he did evils in the eyes of the Lord by following the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he caused Israel continue to commit sin by worshiping the golden calves. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and for a long time he kept them under the power of Hazael, king of Aram, and Ben-Hadad, and his son, the kingdom of Syria. Then Jehoshaphat sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw how severely the king of Syria was oppressing Israel. Well, what does God do? God does provide a deliverer. And they escaped from the power of Aram. So the Israelites lived in their own homes that they had before, because they were being dispersed out, and they were able to just remain in their homes and continue to reign within their keep their kingdom in power. So they are limping along. They're limping along because they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit. They continued in them. Also, the Asherah pole remained standing in Samaria. Remember the Asherah pole? They had Asherah poles all over the place, etc. And the Asherah pole is the same as the Baal. They would sacrifice children, but they also have ritual sex in those places as part of the practice of the worship of Asherah. Nothing had been left of the army of Jehoshaphat except for 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. So they are a very weak empire. They have very little forces to protect themselves, but God is still protecting them at this point. As for the other events, the reigns of Jehoshaphat, all that he did and all the achievements are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. So we think of that's how it's that. Then Joash, his son, succeeded him as king. He would be buried in Samaria. So the northern kingdom is impoverished. It really is just barely limping along. It's barely holding. It has very few forces maintaining it. It's lost all its riches. It's given it all up to the Syrians. Amaziah, his son, succeeded him as king. Others will follow in a series of kings, one worse than the other. So as you continue to read in the story, we're seeing all that is taking place and how one king after another come in, and one king would come in and normally by assassinating the previous king. And the kingdom will continue to just limp along and get worse and worse before it comes crashing down. So we will jump on. We will continue into the story in chapter, I think we're in chapter, if I remember right, we're jumping in, I think it's into 19. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, son of Jehoshaphat, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned for 16 years. But he did, as they've been before, he continued to do evil in the eyes of the Lord and did not turn away from any of the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit, and they continued to do that. You know, why could I not tear down those altars? That's what you have to ask ourselves. As for the other events of the reign of Jehoash, all he did and all his achievements, including his war against Amaziah, king of Judah, they're not written in the book of the annals of the king. So it's all written down. Now Elijah had been suffering from the illnesses from which he will die. Jehoash, king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. My father, he cried, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. Well, Elijah says, get a bow and some arrows, and he did so. Take the bow in your hands, he said to the king of Israel. When he had taken it, Elijah put his hands on the king's hands. He says, open the east window, he said, and he opened it. Shoot, Elijah said, and he shot. And the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram, Elijah declared, you will completely destroy the Arameans at Epic. So Elijah is giving him one of his last prophecies to that. The man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have defeated Aram and completely destroyed it. But now you will defeat it only 3 times. And Elijah dies and is buried. As we've learned before, God works miracles through those close in relationship with him. We can see the miracles happen because they are in a close relationship. I always think about when we first began and the fact we learned about Yahweh Elohim. When we say Yahweh Elohim, it is a very, very close personal relationship with God. And only someone who has that kind of relationship is is God performing the miracle through them. And that's what we witnessed with Elijah and now Elijah, the fact God performing these miracles through them. So when Elijah has died, he is buried. Now, Moabite raiders used to enter the city every spring. Once, while some of the Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders. So they threw the man's body into Elijah's tomb. So when the body touched Elijah's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. So you see, that's how close a relationship Elijah would have had with God. Again, I said it in the notes here. It tells you the fact that no one can perform a miracle except for God. And it's good for us to continue to remember, as we see, this is all the connection between this and the New Testament when we get there, is to remember, I have in here what Peter said when he declares that Jesus is the Messiah in chapter 16 of Matthew. When Jesus came to the reign of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do the people say the Son of Man is? And they replied, some say that John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. We witnessed and read Elijah, then Elijah, both performing miracles of feeding. Elijah feeding the widow and her son. Elijah multiplied the food to feed 100 men. Then we see Jesus feeding the 5,000. So we see Jesus always doing more and greater. But the people many times are looking at him thinking that he is the Elijah or Elijah. So that, Elijah. We also see the miracle of restoration of life take place. Elijah raised a dead child who had just died. Elijah raises a dead child who is cold dead. Then Jesus raises the child widow of Naaman's son. But he would also raise Lazarus, who is not only cold dead, as what in the King James Version says, he stinketh. His body is decomposing. So that shows the miracles of what is taking place and what God is doing with those that he has brought into this world. And for Jesus, his only begotten son, he has given him the ability to perform these miracles beyond anything that any of the prophets who had come before him were able to do. Well, Hazael, king of Aram, oppressed Israel throughout the reign of Jehoshaphat. But the Lord was gracious to them and had compassion and showed concern for them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To this day, he has been willing to destroy them or banish. He has not been willing to destroy. He's been unwilling to destroy them or banish them because of his presence. Well, Hazael, king of Aram, died, and Ben-Hadad, his son, succeeded him as king. Then Joash, son of Jehoshaphat, recaptured from Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, the towns he had taken in battle from his father Jehoshaphat. 3 times Jehoshaphat defeated him, and so he had recovered the Israelite towns. So we see with the death of Elijah, he is the last of the prophets of the Northern Kingdom. There will be no more prophets. In chapters 14 to 16, we will continue to witness the downward spiral, as I was saying before, and the fact one king killing another, and then slaughtering the families of the king, the predecessor, etc. We will have raiding parties coming in from the north. And all this is going on in the 700s BCE. So we're coming to the end of the kingdom of Israel. In the far northeast, the northern Iraq today, the Assyrian Empire is on the rise. Not the Syrian, it's the Assyrian Empire. And it's a very strong, powerful empire that will come up, and we're going to see what it's going to do. We've been witnessing kings killing kings. There's total instability in the northern kingdom. And they're going farther and farther away from God. They're leaving the Azareth pole there. They're letting the worship sites of Dan and Beersheba still be there. Rather than turning closer to God, they continue to remain unfaithful to God. So God finally gets to that place. I'm done. So we turn to chapter 17. Hosea is the last king of Israel. So the pages I gave you way back, they gave you the list of all the kings. We'll see him become the last. So in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, the southern kingdom, Hosea, son of Elah, became king of Israel in Samaria. And he reigned 9 years, and he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not like the kings of Israel who preceded him. So he's still continuing doing evil, but he's not as bad as the ones before. Well, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up to attack Hosea, who had been Shalmar's vassal and had paid him tribute. So Shalmar had control of them. He was a vassal king. He was allowed to reign in his kingdom, just like the vassal king is very much like King Herod. When we think of when time of Christ, King Herod is a vassal king. He is there in name only. He is given control of his people, but everything's all honor and glory is going back to Caesar, and so that's what he's paying. So Hosea became a traitor rather than continue to honor his as a vassal king. He's going to discover that that Hosea has become a traitor because he has sent envoys to the southern king of Egypt, to the southern king of Egypt, and he had no longer paid tribute to the king of Syria as he had done the year before. Therefore, Shalmaneser, he seized him and put him in prison, and the king of Syria invaded the entire land, marched against Samaria, and laid siege on it for 3 years. So we are witnessing the fall of the northern kingdom. Well, the 9th year, 722 BCE is a date we should remember. The king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Halah and Gozan and on the harbor of the river and the towns of Medes. So we're seeing that this is where we begin to see the Israelites go into what they call the diaspora. They're being forced from their homes, driven from their lands, from their country into the other kingdoms, and there they will continue as a people, but they're being absorbed into the populations of the other kingdom. Well, so we think Israel's exiles because of the sin. They have continued to do what they've been told not to do. All this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of Egypt and under the power of the Pharaoh the king. It basically gives you the list of the things they have been doing. They worship other gods. They follow the practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before them as well. Practices the kings of Israel had introduced. The ones that Jezebel introduced under her husband Ahab. The Israelites secretly did things against the Lord, their God, that were not right. From watchtower to fortified city, they built themselves high places in all the towns. They weren't supposed to do that. They set up sacred stones and Azareth poles on every high hill and every other spreading tree. At every high place, they burned incense that the nations whom the Lord had driven out before them had done. They did wicked things that aroused the Lord's anger. They worshiped idols, though the Lord had said, "You shall not do this." Well, the Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers. They've been continually warning him, turn from your evil ways, observe my commands and decrees in accordance with the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, that delivered to you through my servants, the prophets. But I apologize, I didn't turn that list up. But they would not listen and were all stiff-necked as the ancestor who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees, the covenant he had made with their ancestors, and the statutes he had warned them to keep. They followed worthless idols and themselves became worthless. They imitated the nations around them although the Lord had ordered them, do not do as they do. They had done exactly as everybody else does. This is the challenge for us today to say, are we doing, always asking ourselves, are we doing what Christ our Lord has called us to do? Because it is the fact that we as people are constantly being challenged by others. Do we want to do what everybody else is doing, or are we going to keep on the path that Christ has called us to be? Well, they forsook all the commands of the Lord their God and made for themselves 2 idols cast in the shape of calves and an Azareth pole. They bowed down to all the starry hosts. They worshiped Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing God's anger. So we can tell how angry God is at this point. So the Lord was very angry of Israel and removed from them his presence. He says, "Be gone. Only the tribe of Judah is left." And even Judah did not keep the commands of the Lord, their God. They followed their practice of Israel had introduced. Therefore the Lord rejected all the people of Israel. He afflicted them and gave them into the hands of the plunderers until he thrust them from his presence. So that's a very powerful thing, what is taking place in the north. And we're being foretold what's going to happen in the south. So when he tore Israel away from the house of David, they made Jeroboam son of Nebat the king their king. Jeroboam enticed Israel away from following the Lord and caused them to commit great sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them until the Lord removed them from his presence, as he had warned through all his servants and prophets. So the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into the exile of Assyria, and they are still there. So this is where we're coming to the close of this, and the thinking about this is where we are. We watched, is the plan of salvation going to continue? What is taking place? Here's God's people being the ones of the Northern Kingdom, being God allowing them to being taken from the promised land, and they're losing everything that they have. But they were foretold this. It's always going back to remember back in Deuteronomy chapter 4, when the Israelites have been taken from Egypt for 40 years. Here we have the first generation is gone. Those who had left Egypt had all passed. Here is their children. The second generation is there, getting ready to enter into the promised land. And there Moses stands before them as he retells them their story so they will remember what had taken place. They had grown up in the wilderness and they're getting ready to go into the promised land. So Moses is retelling them the story they need to remember. And there in chapter 4, verse 25, he says, after you have had children and grandchildren and have lived in the land a long time, he's telling them, this is what your forefathers, your parents were told. If you then become corrupt and make any kind of idol, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord, your God, and arousing his anger, I call the heavens and the earth as witness against you this day, that you will quickly perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You will not live there long, but will certainly be destroyed. The Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and only a few of you will survive among the nations to which the Lord will drive you. There you will worship man-made gods of wood and stone, which cannot see or hear or eat or smell. But if from there you seek the Lord your God, you will find him if you seek him, and with all your heart and with all your soul. So God foretold through Moses to the people, if you do this, if you fall away, I'm going to let you be dispersed. You will lose the land you're about to enter. You will lose your homeland. But again, this is what we're going to see in the future. If you turn your hearts and seek me, those are the few that will be remained. That's what we're going to enter in as we continue the story. We will see first the destruction and fall, then we will see the begin of those the few remaining coming back and listening to these words and understanding. For the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not abandon, destroy you, or forget the covenant with your ancestors, which he confirmed to them by oath. So God has made a covenant. But right now we're seeing the northern kingdom totally lose it. So the king of Assyria brought the people from Babylon, Kuthroth and Ava and Hamath and Sepharvaim, and settled them in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites. So he said he's bringing in other people into Samaria, and we see this as a problem again, not only because of what Samaria has done in the first place and why those at the time of Christ, of how they look down upon Samaritans, but it's also because here are more people being brought in, and the few remaining that's going to be remaining there are going to intermarry again. So when they first lived there, they did not worship the Lord, so he sent lions among them, and they killed some of the people. It was reported to the king of Assyria, the people you deported and resettled in the towns of Samaria do not know what the God of that country requires. So he sent lions among them, which are killing them off, because the people do not know what he requires. Then the king of Syria came back with this order. Have one of the priests you took captive from Samaria go back to live there and teach the people what the God of the land requires. So one of the priests who had been exiled from Samaria came to live in Bethel and taught them how to worship the Lord. Nevertheless, each national group made its own gods in the several towns where they settled and set them up. And the shrines the people in Samaria had made it in the high places. So even you see the king of Assyria is seeing the power of God and is saying, send back a priest to teach them. But that's the challenge. Are they going to continue to listen? Well, the people of Babylon, so we continue to see it, that of what's taking place. To this day, they persist in their former practices. They neither worship the Lord nor adhere to the decrees and regulations and the laws and command the Lord gave the descendants of Jacob, whom he had named in Israel. So, they're giving opportunity. When the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites, he commanded them, do not worship any other gods or bow down to them, serve them or sacrifice them. But the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt, who with mighty power and outstretched arm, is the one who you must worship. To him you shall bow down, and to him offer sacrifices. You must always be careful to keep the decrees and the regulations, the laws and the commands he wrote for you. Do not worship other gods. Do not forget the covenant I have made with you. Do not worship other gods. Rather, worship the Lord your God. It is he who will deliver you from the hand of all your enemies. But they would not listen, but persisted in their former practices. Even while these people were worshiping the Lord, they were serving their idols. To this day, their children and grandchildren continue to do as their ancestors did. Well, we end with God has judged the people. 10 of the 12 tribes are no longer coming, are no longer, it's all coming to an end at 722 BCE. So as we continue to read this next week, we'll see the southern kingdom is not doing much better, and they will fall next. It was no fun having me in the back of the room. But I hope you see, you're seeing this journey we're on on this story of you're seeing the plan of salvation unfold, and you're seeing what God has done to lay it all out, and you're seeing how they squirrel. we have come so far as a people. If you really think about it, we no longer kill our predecessors. Isn't that a nice thing? We're not, the next president comes in, doesn't go kill all the other people's, because we don't have kings anymore. On that, we don't have that. We don't see that kind of atrocities taking place. We see people. We've come so far how we treat people and everything else, and how passing the power and all those things. But we see people, we're seeking to live and walk with God. And the fact, and even our own challenges we see, you can see the plan of salvation is there. We're called to love God of all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Sounds real familiar in Deuteronomy, right? It's not, Jesus is not telling us something new. It's been told since the very beginning. And he says, love thy neighbor as thyself. And that's, really take care of each other, listen and do what God has asked us to do. So that's the challenge we're all facing right now. As the fact we continue to learn, you're now seeing the connections between the Old and New Testament over and over again. And so, and that hopefully it's what you're seeing, you're now understanding a lot of times what Jesus is saying, or Peter or Paul or whatever, is the fact that the prophecies that have been foretold, et cetera, or they're constantly pointing, the Jewish writers are constantly pointing back to the predecessors. So it's a time we get to see the Transfiguration Sunday. We see Elijah up there with Moses, and there's Christ, and remembering these stories and why they're there, and how this is all tied together. So it's all being foretold in that. Any questions? Well, you all have a wonderful day as we continue on.